What if I told you that while everyone's obsessing over Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, an entire continent just quietly became a space superpower? What if I told you that right now, above your head, 65 African satellites are orbiting Earth, and most people have no idea this is happening? In August 2024, Senegal, a country most people couldn't find on a map, launched a satellite that's revolutionizing West African agriculture. Egypt has more satellites than India had 5 years ago. Nigeria is literally using space technology to fight terrorism in real time. And Rwanda, they're planning missions that would make NASA jealous. This isn't some feel-good story. This is the most underreported technological revolution of our lifetime. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why Africa might just save the world. No clickbait, just facts that will blow your mind. Here's what the media isn't telling you. In 1999, Africa had one satellite, just one. Today, 65 and counting, with 14 countries running their own space programs. That's not gradual progress, that's an explosion. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. While SpaceX charges $67 million per launch, African engineers are putting satellites in orbit for under $5 million. They're not just copying Western technology, they're revolutionizing it. Egypt doesn't just have satellites, they're building the African Development Satellite, a collaboration between 6 African nations that will monitor climate change for the entire continent. When was the last time you saw European countries share space technology like that? South Africa is manufacturing satellites that are being used by other countries. Nigeria has engineers who were trained in Russia and China, but came home to build something uniquely African. Algeria has been quietly building one of the world's most sophisticated Earth observation networks. And here's the kicker. Most of these programs started in the last decade. We're not watching slow development, we're watching a continental sprint to space, and somehow, nobody's paying attention. Want to know the real reason this matters? It's not just about national pride. African space programs are generating billions in economic value, and it's happening right under our noses. In Nigeria, satellite data prevented $50 million in crop losses last year alone. One satellite mission, $50 million saved. In Mozambique, space-based disaster monitoring saved thousands of lives during Cyclone Idai. But here's what's crazy. They're not paying foreign companies for this data anymore. They're generating it themselves. The space sector in South Africa employs over 7,000 people in high-tech jobs. That's more than most European space programs. Nigeria's space initiative has created 1,500 technical positions, and they can't hire fast enough. These aren't minimum wage jobs. These are engineers, data scientists, and satellite operators earning competitive international salaries. But the real game changer? Education. The Future African Space Explorers program just graduated 312 students, half of them girls, from 3 countries. These aren't just students learning about space. They're building and launching actual satellites, teenagers building satellites in Africa. Companies like Intelsat are running workshops across the continent because they need African talent. Not African resources, not African markets, African brains. Meet Africa's space warriors. These aren't the countries you'd expect. Egypt, the quiet giant. 13 satellites in orbit and counting. They're not just launching satellites, they're building them from scratch and leading continental collaboration. The Sphinx satellite, pure Egyptian engineering. South Africa, the manufacturing powerhouse. They're not just participating in the space race, they're supplying it. Other African countries buy South African satellites because they're that good. Nigeria, the problem solvers. Their satellites aren't vanity projects, they're stopping terrorists, managing water crises, and monitoring oil theft in real time. Nigerian satellites have literally prevented international incidents. But here's where it gets wild. Senegal just launched their first satellite and it's already transforming agriculture. Ghana is monitoring illegal mining from space. Rwanda's planning Earth observation missions that will make them the environmental watchdog for Central Africa, and they're working together. The African Development Satellite isn't just one country showing off. It's 6 nations pooling their expertise to create something none of them could build alone. When was the last time you saw that level of international cooperation? Now, I'm not going to lie to you. Africa's space revolution faces some serious obstacles, and they're not pretty. Money is problem number 1. NASA spends $25 billion annually. The entire African continent spends less than $500 million on space programs combined. That's not a funding gap, that's a funding canyon. Problem number 2, brain drain. African engineers train in African universities, get recruited by European and American companies, and never come back. It's like training Olympic athletes and watching them compete for other countries. Problem number 3, infrastructure. You can't run a space program from a laptop. You need ground stations, testing facilities, and manufacturing capabilities that cost hundreds of millions to build. But here's why I'm telling you this is the most important story of our time. African countries are solving these problems in ways that are changing the entire space industry. They're pioneering low-cost satellite designs that work better than expensive alternatives. They're creating international partnerships that transfer real technology, not just money. They're building space programs that serve their people first and show off second. Here's what happens next and why it changes everything. Climate change is hitting Africa harder than anywhere else. But instead of being victims, African countries are becoming the world's climate monitoring center. Their satellites are tracking deforestation, desertification, and weather patterns that affect the entire planet. When the next global climate crisis hits, African satellites might be the early warning system that saves millions of lives. Africa has the youngest population on Earth. Over 60% are under 25. They're growing up with smartphones, internet access, and space technology as normal. This generation isn't just learning about rockets, they're building them. African innovation is already changing space technology. When you have limited budgets, you innovate differently. African engineers are creating satellites that do more with less, ground systems that work in challenging environments, and mission designs that maximize impact per dollar spent. NASA, ESA, and China are establishing partnerships with African space agencies because Africa offers something they don't have: unique perspectives, creative solutions, and a fresh approach to old problems. Africa isn't catching up to the space race. Africa is changing the space race. 65 satellites, 14 national programs, thousands of high-tech jobs, millions of lives improved, billions in economic value, and this is just the beginning. The continent that gave humanity its first steps is about to give us our next giant leap. While everyone else is looking at Mars, Africa is solving problems on Earth and doing it from space. But here's the thing, this story is happening right now, and most people have no idea. If this video blew your mind, imagine what you don't know about African innovation in AI, renewable energy, and biotechnology. Hit that subscribe button because we're diving deep into the African tech revolution that's reshaping our world. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The future isn't just being written in Silicon Valley anymore, it's being written from space, by Africa.